Hey, so for my field experience, I was in a 10th grade, 11th grade classroom at Hillcrest High. And so one of the experiences that I had was I was working one on one with a student. We were partners for this reading, and the teacher's instructions was that he would read one paragraph and then I would read the next, and we just go back and forth like that. Well, he decided that he was going to read the entire article that we were assigned to read. This wasn't because he misunderstood the directions. It was because he wanted to prove to me that he could read really well and wanted to show me that he could read. So that was kind of cool, and I was actually really happy with how he did. And he really tried really hard to sound out words that he wasn't sure of, which was really cool to experience. And then I'm also doing reading tutoring for a 7th grader at a different school. So I was able to use that to help this student who is originally Spanish speaking. I was able to help him with these new words and help him break them down so that he could read them without assistance. So that was really cool. And yeah, so we had to pretend we were partners for the rest of the day, and he really worked really hard to prove that he could do what was asked without too much assistance, which was really awesome. Another experience that I had was I was working in small groups. Now, mind you, the classroom setup is rows of twos all the way down, and there's about 4 or 5 aisles of these rows of twos, and they're all facing the front. So the kids had to take their chairs and spin them so that they were in groups of 4 instead of groups of 2. And I had to sit in one of these groups that only had 3 kids. So I was kind of helping lead that group. And so one of the kids decides to look at me and says, "Why do I need to take this class? I don't understand why I have to read and write." And so everybody else in the group started getting a little wild about that topic. And so I kind of had to explain to him, we read every day, and writing helps us with our reading, and just kind of explain to him that even though we might not read books every day, we do have to read every day. We read on our phones, we go on social media, we have to read to learn how to cook, or for classes, or really anything, we have to read. So, yeah, that was fun trying to get him to understand that reading and writing really do come in handy on a day-to-day basis. So, yeah. And then the final experience that I wanted to talk about was I got to sit in on a science class, because the reading class that I was with, they were having a party. So I went and sat in on a science class which had about 8 ELL students in that class, but it was also a general education class. So it was really cool to see how the teacher interacted with these students. And so there were 2 teachers. There was the science teacher for that class, and then the ELL teacher for these 8 students. And they did this really awesome co-teaching thing where they played off of each other, but they also had their specific roles that they were teaching. Like the science teacher had the vocabulary and introduced the vocabulary at the very beginning of the class, and you could tell that some of the kids, even the ones that weren't ELL students, still were like, what are we doing? And then instead of just giving them a definition and making them write it and understand it, they had the kids all stand up and start playing that role. So they like put them all in the back of the room and had them all like get into like this giant cluster of kids in this one tiny little area, and then had one kid come and move out and slowly move the kids between the two areas. And that was one of their words. I can't remember what the word was, but it was one of the words that they were learning that day. And it was just really cool to see these kids like understand what was going on and what they needed to learn, because they were moving around and actually doing what the definition was. And then they'd all come back and write down the definition, and then they were like, oh, we get it. And then they go move on to the next definition or the next word. And then at the end, I thought it was really cute because they watched a video and the teachers were just really cool, and they played off of each other. Like they didn't try to like step on each other's toes, and it wasn't like segmented into pieces that didn't let it flow. They were just kind of like, oh, well, I can do this, and this is what we're gonna do now. And it was just really cool, and the kids really enjoyed it. And at the end of the class, like usually there's those kids that need the extra help and want to don't really understand what happened, so they need to ask questions. But in this class, none of the kids had to stand up and ask questions. And the ELL's teacher, he was walking around and going to those individual students, and they were all in different groups. They weren't grouped together. There were about 8 groups, so they were all in their own little group with general education students. So it was just really cool to see them working with other students that weren't ELL students. So those are my experiences.